3 hidden lessons only the deeply hurt understand. When your life falls apart, when you feel as if all the light has drained out of your world and you are walking through each day like a shadow of yourself, have you ever silently wondered if there is anything that can really pull you back from that edge? And when you hear people say that simply reciting a scripture like the Diamond Sutra can save a life, have you ever doubted it and thought to yourself, how could just a few lines of ancient words possibly touch the depth of this modern pain? Welcome back to the channel, my friend. It truly means a lot that you are here with me again today, especially if you are listening to this at a time when your heart feels heavy and your days feel long. Because in this video we are going to talk about something that many people only discover when they have reached the lowest point in their lives, the moment when all the disguises fall away and you are forced to look directly at your suffering, your fear, and your emptiness. And that is the mysterious way in which the Diamond Sutra can actually save a person, not as a superstition, not as a magic spell, but as a profound medicine for the heart and mind that only reveals its power when life has already stripped you of your illusions. The beginning, I want to share 2 key ideas with you, and then we are going to journey together through stories, reflections, and insights, like sitting together at night talking honestly about life. The first idea is this: the Diamond Sutra does not save you by changing the outside world. It saves you by shattering the way your mind clings to the world, to your thoughts, to your pain, and to your identity. And in that shattering, something new is born. The second idea is this: only when you have really suffered, when you have cried until you have no tears left, when you feel as if you are standing at the edge of a cliff with nowhere to go, are you truly ready to understand what the Diamond Sutra is saying, because its core message is so radical, so sharp, and so freeing that an unshaken life can barely tolerate it. So, as you listened, I invite you to imagine that we are not just talking about philosophy or religion. We are talking about you, your story, your fear, your confusion, your hope. At a start from that moment in life that we all dread but many of us cannot avoid, the lowest point. Maybe your lowest point came after a sudden loss. Someone you love left this world truly, or left you for someone else, or simply walked out of your life without an explanation. Maybe your lowest point came when your career collapsed, a business failed, your debts piled up, and that frightening moment arrived when you genuinely did not know how you were going to survive the next month. Maybe your lowest point was when your body broke down, when illness suddenly appeared like a storm and swept away your sense of control, leaving you staring at hospital ceilings and test results, wondering what you had done wrong. Or maybe your lowest point was quieter, harder to describe in words, a long, gray emptiness where you woke up every morning feeling numb, where nothing felt meaningful, where you looked at your own face in the mirror and felt that you were looking at a stranger. Such times, well-meaning words often sound hollow when people tell you to cheer up, to stay positive, to look on the bright side. A part of you wants to scream because it feels like they have no idea how deep your exhaustion goes. And in this kind of darkness, some people meet the Diamond Sutra for the first time. They do not come to it as scholars or experts. They come to it like a person lost in a desert who sees a well in the distance and thinks, I do not know if this water is real, but I am so thirsty that I will walk there anyway. Imagine a person named Alex. Alex had always been a hard-working, responsible person. He followed the rules, took care of family, tried to be a good friend. On the outside, everything looked fine: a stable job, a small apartment, a circle of people who seemed to care. But then, one year, everything crashed. The company downsized, and Alex lost their job. A relationship they had invested years in suddenly ended. Nearly the same time, a close family member was diagnosed with a serious illness. Felt like one wave after another crashing down, with no time to catch a breath. First, Alex tried to hold it all together. They sent out resumes, forced themselves to be strong for their family, told friends they were fine, but at night, when the world was quiet, they lay in the dark, feeling like they were falling endlessly through space. Thoughts spun through their mind. I am a failure and useless. Nothing I do matters. Why is this happening to me? Eventually, the anxiety and despair became so intense that even breathing felt heavy. One night, unable to sleep, Alex opened a search on their phone, almost randomly typing, "How to survive when life feels meaningless." Among the many results, one title caught their eye: someone sharing how reciting the Diamond Sutra during their darkest time had saved their life. Alex did not know anything about this text. It sounded far away, ancient, almost unrelated to the modern, messy world. But something in the sincerity of that story moved them. Without expecting much, they found an audio of the Diamond Sutra and began listening. First it felt strange, almost boring. The language was unusual, the concepts confusing. There were repeated phrases, conversations between the Buddha and disciples, talk about bodhisattvas, about giving, about not clinging to forms. Alex could not fully understand it, but they kept listening, partly out of desperation, partly out of a quiet, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, something here could help. The third night, something changed. The reader reached a part of the text where the Buddha speaks about how all conditioned phenomena are like a dream, an illusion, a bubble, a sato, like dew or lightning, and should be seen as such. These words did not suddenly erase Alex's problems. The debts were still there. The loved one was still sick. The heartbreak was still raw, but for the first time, a tiny crack appeared in the solid wall of their suffering. Strange thought flashed through their mind: if everything I am clinging to is like a dream, then is it possible that the way I think about myself, my identity, my failures, my worth is also just a kind of dream? The Diamond Sutra is like a sharp sword that cuts through illusions, but when you are not ready, that sword feels threatening. However, when you are drowning in suffering, when you feel like there is no way out, that same sword can be the blade that cuts the ropes binding your hands and feet. One of the most powerful aspects of the Diamond Sutra is that it does not comfort you with pretty lies. It does not say, "Do not worry, everything will be fine. Keep chasing your dreams and you will get what you want." Instead, it does something far more radical. It questions the very foundation of the self that is suffering. Throughout the text, there is a constant message that a bodhisattva should liberate countless beings, yet know that no real fixed being is liberated, that a practitioner should not cling to the idea of a self or a person or a separate life. For an ordinary mind, this sounds confusing. Who is suffering then? Who is listening to this teaching? But when your life has hit rock bottom, when the identity you built has already broken apart, these words can feel like someone is finally speaking directly to your experience. You might find yourself thinking, the person I used to be, the one who believed that job, that relationship, that role in the family defined their worth, that person seems to have died already. Meanwhile, the world expects you to keep pretending everything is normal. The Diamond Sutra comes in and says, yes, the identity you cling to is unstable. Yes, all the forms you believed were solid are actually passing, like dreams. And this is not a cruel joke. This is the doorway to freedom. When you are at your lowest, you meet the teaching of emptiness not as a cold philosophy, but as relief. Emptiness in the Diamond Sutra does not mean nothing matters, does not mean life is pointless. Means that every form, every situation, every identity is fluid, conditioned, and not absolutely fixed, or despair feels absolute. But the sutra whispers that it, too, is made of conditions and can change. Or feeling of worthlessness feels like the truth about who you are. But the sutra points out that your idea of ties is itself a moving, conditioned phenomenon, not a permanent, solid thing. The moment you even slightly understand this, space opens up in your heart. Instead of being crushed under the thought, "I am hopeless," you begin to sense, "I am not as tightly defined as my thoughts say." Instead of drowning in, "My life is ruined," you notice, life is changing moment by moment, and this crisis, too, is something rising and passing. But let us be honest, in the middle of a panic attack, in the middle of crying on the floor, emptiness as an idea is not enough. What makes the Diamond Sutra so powerfully healing is not just the concepts, but the living practice of reciting it again and again while your heart is breaking. When someone recites the text sincerely during their lowest time, several hidden transformations begin to happen. The first transformation is in attention. When you are in deep suffering, your mind spirals around the same painful stories. "I am not enough. No one loves me. I will never get better. The future is dark." These thoughts repeat like a tortuous load. When you recite, your attention is gently pulled away from those loops and anchored to the words of the sutra. And if you understand only a little, your mind is no longer completely enslaved by your habitual stories. This is already a form of salvation. The second transformation is in your emotional field. The sutra carries a certain vibration, born from centuries of sincere recitation, study, and practice. You recite, especially when you recite with humility, something in your emotional climate softens. You may find yourself crying at unusual moments, not from despair, but from a sense that a heavy stone in your chest is finally beginning to move. That release is healing. The third transformation is the most subtle and powerful. The sense of a separate, isolated self starts to loosen. If you truly listen to the Diamond Sutra, it keeps telling you to let go of clinging to forms, not just material forms, but mental forms, labels, identities, roles, stories. The more deeply you take this in, the less tightly you cling to the idea that you are an isolated, permanently damaged being. Instead, you start to sense that you are part of a vast, interdependent flow of causes and conditions, where suffering is not a random punishment. It is part of a web of karma and choice, and within that web, there is space for new choices even now. Let us go back to Alex. After that first listening, they felt a tiny shift, so they decided to begin reciting the Diamond Sutra once a day. First, they were slow, stumbling over words. Sometimes their mind would wander, sometimes they would just feel empty. But they made a simple thought: no matter how broken I feel, I will recite this once a day. One evening, after a particularly hard day at the hospital with their sick family member and a rejection email from yet another job application, Alex sat down to recite. But this time, they did something different. Before opening the text, they closed their eyes and whispered, almost like a prayer, "If there is any wisdom in these words, please let me touch it, even just a little." And they began. As they recited, they reached the parts where the Buddha speaks about how bodhisattva should give without attachment to the idea of a giver, a receiver, or a gift. How clinging to marks, images, and ideas leads to a subtle kind of bondage. Suddenly, a realization struck Alex. All this time, they had measured their worth by external marks. Stable job was a mark of success. Relationship was a mark of being worthy of love. Certain image of being a strong, reliable family member was a mark of being God. When those marks were removed, they felt they had become nothing. But through the lens of the Diamond Sutra, they began to see that these marks were never the true measure of their worth. They were temporary labels, like clothes you wear for a season. The sutra was quietly pulling away those labels and asking, without all these marks, without all these temporary identities, what are you really? First, this question is frightening because we are used to defining ourselves through roles. But if you sit with it, it becomes liberating. Alex realized that even in this broken state, there was still something in them that could observe their thoughts, could choose to recite, could feel compassion for their family member, could be tender with their own pain. That silent, witnessing awareness, which the sutra gently paints toward, is not destroyed by losing a job or a relationship. It was there before the crisis, and it remains during and after. The more they recited, the more they tasted this. Slowly, Alex's relationship to their lowest point changed. The external situation did not magically fix itself overnight. There were still bills to pay, difficult medical decisions, long days of job searching. But inside, a new attitude emerged. Instead of constantly asking, "Why is this happening to me?" they began to ask, "What is this crisis trying to teach me about clinging, about identity, about what really matters?" The Diamond Sutra calls practitioners to cultivate a mind that gives, supports, and loves without attachment to form. Their lowest point, Alex started to see that they could still practice this even without money or status. It could be fully present and kind to their sick family member. They could treat themselves with gentleness instead of harsh self-criticism. They could respond to each small moment with as much awareness and care as possible. In doing this, they discovered something surprising. Even in the middle of hardship, there were moments of peace, even joy. Quiet morning baking tea for their loved one. Conversation with a friend when they were fully honest about their struggle and felt truly hurt. Small success, like finding a temporary job. Not glamorous, but enough to keep going. These moments did not erase the pain, but they shone like stars in a dark sky. The Diamond Sutra had walked with them into their lowest valley and whispered, "Your suffering is real, but it is not the whole truth of you." When people say that the Diamond Sutra can save someone at their lowest point, they do not necessarily mean that it will change your external circumstances like a miracle. Rather, it transforms the way you experience those circumstances, and in doing so, it gradually changes your destiny. In Buddhist terms, this is the interplay of karma and wisdom. Karma is the momentum of past actions and choices, both personal and collective, that shape your current life. You cannot simply wish karma away, but wisdom is how you meet your karma, how you respond now. Without wisdom, you meet hard karma with more confusion, anger, and despair, creating new negative causes, deepening your suffering. With the wisdom of emptiness and non-attachment, as taught in the Diamond Sutra, you meet that same karma with clarity, compassion, and patience, planting new, positive causes. For time, this changes the direction of your life. There is another important dimension: compassion for all beings. When you are in pain, It is natural to feel like you are the only one suffering. The Diamond Sutra constantly undermines this sense of separation by speaking about bodhisattvas who vow to liberate countless beings without clinging to the idea of liberating anyone. If you take this into your heart, you begin to realize that your pain is connected to the pain of many others. You are not alone in your despair. Countless people are losing jobs, losing loved ones, facing illness, facing loneliness. This realization is not meant to minimize your suffering, but to widen your heart. Instead of shrinking into the idea, poor me, you begin to feel, my pain is part of the shared human condition, and as I heal, may that healing help others too. Some people at their lowest point start to include others in their recitation. May the power of this sutra support not only me, but all those who are suffering like me. This shift from an isolated self to a connected heart is itself a profound healing. When your heart opens outward, your inner world slowly becomes less cramped, less suffocating. Even if nothing outside changes immediately, the atmosphere inside you changes. You can breathe again. The Diamond Sutra also challenges a deep habit most of us have: the obsession with certainty. When life falls apart, one of the most frightening things is not knowing what will happen next. You long for guarantees, a clear diagnosis, a definite job offer, a fixed plan for the future. The Sutra, with its constant insistence that all forms and ideas are empty, actually trains you to live in uncertainty without collapsing, trains you to walk on ground that is constantly shifting. Not by giving you a new fixed point to cling to, but by helping you discover a deeper trust in the very nature of impermanence. When you internalize even a little of this, you become more flexible. Instead of demanding that life follow your script, you become more like water, flowing around obstacles, adapting to new conditions, exploring possibilities you never considered before your crisis. At a certain point in this journey, many people look back and realize it was precisely at my lowest point, when I had no choice but to let go of my usual defenses, that I was finally ready to hear the Diamond Sutra. Before that, it would have been just words, something to debate intellectually or treat as a cultural artifact. After the fall, it became a mirror and a lifeline. Perhaps you have experienced something similar with other teachings or practices. Phrase about letting go, which once sounded like a nice slogan, suddenly pierces your heart when you are forced to let go of someone or something you never imagined losing. Teaching about compassion, which once felt abstract, suddenly becomes deeply moving when you are finally able to extend genuine kindness to yourself after years of self-hatred. This is why we say that only those who have truly suffered can understand the depth of the Diamond Sutra's compassion and wisdom. It is not that the teaching excludes anyone, but that real pain cracks open the shell of the ego, making you more receptive. Suffering softens your arrogance, humbles your certainty, and makes you more honest. And in that raw honesty, the sharp, clear, fearless teaching of emptiness can enter. I want you to imagine now your own lowest point, whether it is in the past or perhaps still ongoing. Picture that version of you sitting alone, maybe on the edge of a bed, maybe in a hospital hallway, maybe in a small, messy room, staring at the floor. Imagine placing the Diamond Sutra gently in that person's hands, not as a heavy obligation, not as a superstition, but as a quiet companion. Imagine saying to that version of you, you do not need to understand everything right away. You do not need to recite perfectly. Just read a little, listen a little, recite a little, and allow these words to sit quietly next to your pain. Over time, as you walk through your days, as you cry, as you feel lost, you keep this practice like a tiny lamp. Sometimes the flame is strong, sometimes it barely flickers, sometimes you do not recite for a while, and then you return. But each time you return, you come with a little more humility, a little more sincerity. Gradually, you notice subtle shifts. The same insults or disappointments that used to crush you still hurt, but they do not penetrate as deeply. You respond more slowly, less reactively. You see your own patterns of clinging and grasping more clearly, and sometimes you manage, even just once in a day, to loosen your grip. You begin to find a strange gratitude even for the lowest point, because you see that without that collapse, you would never have sought such depth. You would have kept living on the surface, chasing marks of success, defending a fragile image of yourself, ever questioning what you truly are. Now, imagine years later, you meet someone else at their lowest point. You see in their eyes the same emptiness and fear you once carried. And because you have walked that path, you do not speak to them with easy optimism. You do not throw slogans at them. Instead, you sit with them, listen to their story, and if the right moment comes, you gently share your own experience, how you stumbled upon the Diamond Sutra when you were ready to give up, how reciting it did not magically erase your problems, but slowly changed the entire way you relate to them, and how that change turned out to be more powerful than any external rescue. In that moment, you become part of the living transmission of this teaching. The Diamond Sutra is no longer just ink on paper. It becomes a thread of wisdom and compassion running through real human hearts across generations. And perhaps, just as someone's story once saved you from the edge, your story becomes the rope that another person grabs when they feel they are slipping. That is why I often say that suffering, when met with wisdom, can become the ground of awakening. The Diamond Sutra, with its uncompromising message that all forms are empty and that true giving is free of self-centered grasping, can feel harsh at first. But when you have been shattered, when you have nothing left to defend, it becomes a kind of fierce love, stripping you of illusions so you can finally stand on something deeper than success or failure, praise or blame. If you are listening to this and you are not at your lowest point right now, I would still invite you to develop a relationship with the Diamond Sutra gently, without pressure, because life is impermanent, storms can come unexpectedly, and having already planted the seeds of this practice can be a great support when the winds rise. And if you are listening to this while you are in the storm, please know this: most of all, your pain is not proof that you are broken beyond repair. Your lowest point is not the final chapter of your story. Within the very heart of your suffering lies the possibility of a new understanding of life, a new relationship with yourself, a new compassion for others. The Diamond Sutra is one of the texts that can guide you across that invisible threshold, from hiding behind identities to seeing through them, from clinging to letting go, from feeling like a helpless victim of fate to walking as a participant in the unfolding of your karma with courage and clarity. Think of this sharing not as a lecture, but as a hand on your shoulder, a reminder that countless people before you have walked into darkness with this sutra in their heart and emerged with a different light in their eyes. They were not superhuman. They were ordinary people who hurt badly, who despaired deeply, who doubted and cried and fell. The only difference is that at some point they turned toward this teaching, humbled themselves, and let it work on them slowly. like water wearing away a stone. So as we come to the close of this long heart-to-heart, I want to invite you into a gentle reflection. What is one concrete way you could bring the spirit of the Diamond Sutra into your life starting today, especially in relation to your suffering? Maybe it is to start a simple daily recitation, no matter how short, with the sincere intention to see through your clinging. Maybe it is to catch yourself when you label yourself as a failure and instead remind yourself that this label is just a thought, a passing form, not the truth of your being. Maybe it is to look at one relationship where you have been insisting that the other person must act according to your expectations and experiment just a little with loosening your grip and seeing what happens. Maybe it is to sit quietly for a few minutes each day, watching your thoughts come and go, and repeating inwardly that phrase from the Sutra about phenomena being like dreams, illusions, bubbles, and shadows, not as an escape from life, but as a way to live more lightly and kindly within it. Your path will be your own, and you do not need to compare your progress with anyone else's. The Diamond Sutra invites you to walk honestly, courageously, and compassionately with your own mind, starting exactly where you are. Also want to say that if you have your own story about how this text or any spiritual practice held you when you were at your lowest, your story matters more than you might think. Sharing it can be an act of generosity that aligns perfectly with the spirit of the Sutra, giving without clinging to the idea of the giver or expecting a result. Someone out there, listening or reading in silence, might hear your words and think, if they could survive, maybe I can too. So, if you feel comfortable, I invite you to share your experiences, insights, or questions in the comments. Tell us about the moments when you felt safe not just from death, but from the death of hope, the death of meaning. Tell us how you met these teachings and what changed, even if the change was small and quiet. And if this video has touched something in you, if it has brought you a bit of calm, a bit of understanding, or simply the sense that you are not the only one struggling, I kindly ask you to support this channel by subscribing, leaving a like, and sharing this content with someone who might need it. You can also consider joining as a member if you wish to help sustain this space where we explore the deep connections between suffering, wisdom, and compassion. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end, especially if your heart is heavy today. You remember, when the night feels endless, that dawn does not come because we force it, but because it is the natural movement of life. Our task is to keep the small lamp of awareness lit, to let teachings like the Diamond Sutra steady your hand, and to walk on, one honest step at a time, until you discover for yourself that even your lowest point can become the doorway to a wider, freer, kinder way of being. At the end of the day, we all need something that brings us back to ourselves. Something that reminds us to slow down, breathe, and stay centered. Simple bracelet can do exactly that. Every bead you touch brings your mind back to calm, back to clarity, back to the present moment. If one of the bracelets you just saw resonates with you, you can find the purchase link in the video description and explore more beautiful styles in our channel store. Let the one meant for you find its way to your wrist.